I'm Alexandra Kreis, and you're listening to Outer Travel in a Journey. In my own search for self-understanding, I have met people from all walks of life. I bring to you a taste of these encounters. Hello and welcome back to Outer Travel in a Journey. Today I have a special for you because I have two returning guests, Astrid Walsh and Kerstin Walsh. Welcome to the two of you. So I wanted to talk to the two of you about this thing I saw the other day, and I kind of felt it linked very nicely in how I perceived the two of you. So maybe we can, and that was somebody released an album, a German rapper, and he called it Musketeer. And you know how fast my brain goes. I was like, "Oh, Musketeer, what does he want to say?" I haven't even listened to the album, and I haven't read anything about it. But it spiraled me into this thought pattern of that the Musketeers, I think, are still very alive amongst society. That idea of a strong partnership, you know, even though it was three, you know, so it's a very, you think it's a stable relationship. And I was like, oh, so people are really dreaming about this thing still, you know, because it's still kept alive. It seems to become one of these kind of fairy tales of how we find heroes and role models in engaging, you know, we support each other, we fight the world and the system. And then I spiraled forward into the thought how I had, you know, lately conversations with Shira, my daughter, around how she wished she had like a stable circle of friends at this point, you know, where she has 5 more friends. And we know also Enid Blyton, you know, her 5 friends came to mind, you know, like how important this is. And then I felt like, oh, I want to have a conversation around this because I feel we are all dreaming about that, and I'm dreaming about that, but I'm such a lonely wolf at times and a one-on-one connector, you know, and I thought, like, who can I have this conversation with? And here the siblings came to mind. So maybe we can do a quick re-entry of, or like people get to know you. So maybe Astrid, do you want to start off who you are, what you do, and just brief so people get to know you in this podcast?
Okay, well, I'm Astrid Walsh, and a long-standing friend and student of yours. And I live in Cove, which is in Cork Harbour in the south of Ireland. I'm an artist, a visual artist, and I have a 5-year-old, almost 5-year-old son. So that's kind of what fills my days at the moment, my art and my parenting.
Yeah, your mother. And Kerstin?
So I'm Astrid's twin. I'm Kerstin Walsh. I'm also an artist, and I live in Cork City. I have 2 daughters, and I lived a long time with Astrid, but we are now living in 2 different houses. So, and I have known Alex, you now for also quite a number of years.
Yeah, we do know each other as
always
well.
Part of the gang when we got the gang together.
Yes, I was.
It happened for a long time.
Yeah, that hasn't happened in Ireland. Neither has it probably happened here. I mean, besides the pandemic, you know, I think these things are being highlighted, or through the pandemic, this is being highlighted. I was always very grateful for you kind of taking me in while I was living in Ireland. You know, I felt really like another home to go to and a shoulder to lean on. And yeah, so the reason why I brought you on board is because when we worked together, as in like we offered workshops, we offered one workshop. Let's not just kind of spiral it out into more than it is, but we offered a workshop together and around visual art, visual healing and perception. And what was fascinating to me at the time and when I got to know you was what everybody says, you know, that the two of you, you're almost like so familiar with each other that you don't use words and you're not noticing that you don't use words, you know. So somebody like me who's outside in this scenario is like, what's going on here? Why are there no words here? And so, yeah, so what I'm feeling like, you're almost like two musketeers, you know, and in that sense, you support each other very strongly, but you're obviously open to taking other people on board. How do you relate to this story, the personal and the one I just kind of started with? Whoever feels like saying something.
Can I jump in there, just because it just reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a friend of mine who I've known for quite a long time, but we haven't been close friends. I think we're becoming close friends, but who's also a twin. And we were talking about friendships when we were younger, and how actually sometimes it's quite hard to be friends with twins, because I mean, as you say, you know, you were kind of trying to fill in the gaps. We frustrate people quite often, our partners, by starting sentences and not finishing them, but not needing to finish them because the other twin knows exactly what's meant. So just this idea that people have wanted a certain type of friendship with us and maybe haven't got that because, you know, they want to be a twin in some ways, but they're never going to understand the language, or they're never going to. So, you know, there is that kind of element where it's from my perspective, it must be quite difficult as well to know, you know, which twin did I have which conversation with, and to kind of to be friends with two people equally who are so alike.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's challenging in that way, I think. But there are people who, you know, who really can do it and can you know, can switch and can, you know, can have an equal relationship with both of us.
Yeah, I think over time you learn. And I think that we often have done a thing where you know, one of us just steps forward in a friendship. So, or often we would have gotten to know people separately as separate people, you know, and there it's clear, but then there's lots of overlap, and we always used to bring our friends together. So, you know, there's either this point where you know, you have your separate friends that you got to know separately, and that's the way it kind of stays, or you kind of, if you meet people together, sometimes there's this like, you know, here, you lead with this one. We used to do that with guys as well. It was an unspoken, okay, you know, here, you be the main person here. And then, you know, and then if we all get on, then, you know, we find a way, and then the person knows us both well enough that they know that, you know, they'll have to tell all their stories twice. Probably within 10 minutes. And answer the same questions.
Yes. Yes. And so do you, when I think of the Musketeers, such an idolized scenario of deep connective friendships that hold each other's back, but in some way what you're both revealing is, you know, or what Astrid revealed is that can have its downside, because you are being perceived as so close, nobody else can come in. And this is really, you know, I'm just asking a question here, you know, is this something that's good for everybody to have, or I mean, we can't generalize, but why is this myth going on and on and on? If you read famous books, they are about deep friendships, and that's why I mean, you know, you live a really, really deep friendship, the two of you, due to how you came to this world, but also because you kept it up. And I also know twins that aren't as close as the two of you are, and that's why you are also my pick, obviously. As you have the capacity to do both, as Kerstin elaborated. But what do you think? I mean, just thought sharing here.
I'll jump in on that one. I think at the moment, I think that it's a little bit like the myth of your soulmate. I think some people get it and some people don't. You know, I think some people will have that in their lives and they'll be in the right place at the right time,
Yeah.
and have the right kind of personality, and some people won't. And, you know, I know that from I've got two daughters now. One of them's already 10 and the other one's only 6. So the 6-year-old is only really starting on her social path. But my 10-year-old does have a group of friends like that. But it was chance that brought them together. Their classes were amalgamated. She had one really good friend. Their classes were amalgamated, and then they just found each other, and it really works. And for her, it's you know, I think in the media and in the programs they watch, yeah, it's very much a thing. So then, of course, kids
Yeah.
think that they need to have that, and I can see the
Yeah.
pressure from my 6-year-old,
Yeah.
that she thought she'd go to school and she'd automatically have a group of friends, and that's
Yeah.
not really how it works.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, like, thank you so much for that, because it's not only what we choose, but it's also what we are being presented with. You know, I get a constant Bibi and Tina kind of advertisement on my Google stream because we used to, you know, watch it. And that's another one with a close friendship, and where they are so, and one is super special and the other one keeps her earthbound. And of course, we make kids long for that, and we also, as other adults, long for that. I mean, I find myself longing for it sometimes, as in physical nearness. Rather, yeah, you both don't live that close anymore, but still closer than I have any of my friends. You know, and particular when we come into adulthood and later years, we find that friendships just are completely different than they used to be when we were younger, of course, because we have family, and then the family becomes an island, or a partnership becomes an island, or your relationship with your colleagues becomes an island. And yeah, it's a conundrum to me, you know, to stay open to perceive and really see what comes in as support, you know, like whatever comes in as support, instead of this person has to fulfill it. Yeah, Astrid and
Yeah.
Kerstin are not in.
Yeah, when we were chatting just before this call, myself and Kerstin, and we were talking about, you know, the friends that you have probably from an earlier time in your life, you know, who you've gone through things, you know, you've just got a stable kind of base with them. And then, you know, and you mightn't still be living in the same city as those people, but, you know, you can be apart for months and months and not speak and come back together, and nothing has changed. And then there are the people, you know, who your practical day-to-day life brings you together with. So, for example, you know, the other mums or dads at the school gate, you know, the people who have happen to have children the same age as you. So some friends, you know, they drift off into a different life for a while because their children happen to be, you know, 10 years older than yours, and you know, you suddenly find yourself needing and wanting to spend time with different people. And who knows, I don't know whether those friendships will last beyond the children years. But it is kind of interesting how, you know, your practical day-to-day existence kind of affects who your friendship, who your closest friends are. you know, people you mightn't know much about really from their background, from their past, from their, you know, you're just kind of in the present with them. So I find that quite interesting. Can
I ask a personal question then? If you, because the two of you lived together with your families, just so the audience knows, it wasn't just a sister, but you both had family already at the time, or partner, and growing family. And do you find now that you're living apart that because you meet different people, is there a letting go of that deep connection that we all savor or want to have, or is it shifting as such, or getting even more intense because you are so far apart?
I don't think it's changing much, as in, yeah, I mean, we don't have as much time to, I mean, the fundamental connection is the same. We don't have to talk about, you know, meal planning and shopping and these kinds of things anymore. We don't have the time. What I notice most is the change, because we're just not in each other's company on that day-to-day thing anymore, day-to-day level anymore. So, you know, with the kids, you know, it's kind of that kind of spontaneous, let's all go out, you know, in the dark to see if we can see the otter that lives in the river, or, you know, these kind of, let's just, go in the garden and make soup, you know, these kind of spontaneous things that just only happen when you spend a lot of time with people. I mean, we still spend time at each other's houses. We still spend the night, you know, because we live that bit further away. So there is opportunity, but I find that's what I miss kind of the most, is this kind of like, you know, not the like, oh, let's all go to this and this place. And, you know, it's the kind of just when you've been to school and you've done your things, and what happens then when people cohabit or are in close proximity to each other, that kind of thing. And I think that's what we used to have in old-fashioned communities, you know, old village setups, or even neighborhoods where people would just be out kind of, you know. And these days our time is so structured, and people are doing activities, and people are, you know, there's always something going on. That's how I perceive the change now. I don't know about you, Kerstin.
Yeah, I mean, I second that. You know, when we do meet, it's always special. So we have less of the kind of the daily, you know, time to get cranky and be, you know, moany about household and that kind of thing. So we have more time to talk about. But I miss having people around. I think suburban life is a little bit, personally, I think it's a little bit kind of, you know, you have to just make an effort to see people. You know, I like when people are around, and it's not a production to meet somebody. I mean, I'm lucky enough, there are girls in the neighborhood, and they come over and they call on my daughters, and mine can go over to their house. So it's not, but it really depends on what your living situation. You know, some people live in estates and their kids can go out and play in the green, you know, but then there's other people who live in apartments, and they don't have that, you know. So we're kind of in between. And for me personally, I like to just be around people easily.
Which is interesting, because I mean, both of us, I think, are quite introverted, as in I'm definitely an introvert. And before, you know, before my son came along, I was totally happy, often just on my own. Like I didn't, but it's since he's arrived, you know, just this feeling of having, just the life flowing around and not just being the one focus for the child. I think children need, people of different generations and different kids and things, activities they can join in and then leave and go, and like a flow, a kind of a flow, which doesn't happen. What about in Berlin, Alex? We were wondering, do you have people that you encounter on the street who or is it always just, I have to ring up and what's your neighborhood?
No, what came up for me in this conversation right now is, are we looking for the quality of those friendships or the quantity, like the quantity of time spent together, as in, small things like having to rearrange the kitchen or go shopping. But as for that, Berlin is quite easy. You get used to that. If you don't have an immediate outlet, I mean, I said I'm more a lonely wolf, but not really. I'm the, how do you say that, designated, not introvert even, but I'm highly sensitive. So these people like that, as per studies, people like me, we go very intensely into something and perceive it, and then we need more time to conclude and just be with ourselves. And that's working quite well with me in Berlin, because I can be in my apartment, nobody's going to come by and just spontaneous ring the door anymore, like children do with each other. But when I go out, because of the dogs, I know a lot of people here in my neighborhood, and essentially Berlin is like that. You have neighborhoods and kietzes and, like places that belong to a certain part of political, overlooking, and then you stay in that area. So that makes Berlin smaller in some ways. And when you go somewhere else, it's almost like discovering a new place. And here within where I'm living, everybody's quite open. You can go into a cafe. If you go there more often, they recognize you. It's not so anonymous as you might think. And from that level, I have even a neighbor and an older woman who lost her husband, and she has a dog, and she does a solid every day 3 rounds. And on her rounds, what she gets from those rounds with the dogs is that she interacts with people. And here comes my conundrum, and I think the conundrum that my daughter is stumbling upon. I can connect to her and we will have a conversation, and we might share a worry or the other. It's like, oh yeah, now this happened, and we're discussing this and that, and you get an opinion from that person, but you don't get the support of that person completely. And I think that's why the topic is so dear to my heart. Where do we find true sources of support? If I go into my coffee shop and, like in my favorite cafe and saying, help, like somebody probably is going to come and help, but we don't do that. That's the problem, where we are seeking support and exchange that is free of, just straight advice, which we sometimes don't want, but what we're kind of hoping, of an exchange of ideas, on takes, a true listener. I don't have that many anymore. I know I have you guys, ladies, guys, and other people, but at the same time, that's so far off. And that's what my daughter is, noticing. She has a lot of internet friends, and she has really dear friends, and they've come into our lives 3-4 years ago. We know their names, we know what they do, we know their family backgrounds, but they are not here, so and that is what makes it all difficult, at least to me. And that's probably also why I created that sense of, I want to have a sangha, a community where we can listen to each other without finding already solutions, but you get different qualities of listening and different qualities of exchange with each and everybody in there. And now I'm looking for the immediate, like, where can this happen? So that's, I think, what the Musketeers and 5 friends from Enid Blyton, you know, say we go together on an adventure, you know, we'll see. One maybe has a quality of seeing something earlier than someone else. Another friend might have the stability of blah, 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 blah. You know, all these qualities that come together. The bigger you make your platform of so-called friends, you know, or whatever we want to call them, soulmates.
I think it's kind of peak individualism, really, what you know, what we're living through. I don't know if it's peak, but in a big city anyway, I'm sure, I hope it's peak, where we're all very comfortable in our spaces that are controlled, you know, and we have lost the ability to ask for help and to give help. And I think here in Ireland, I don't know about in Dublin, but I know that in Cork, so it depends on where you are, but where I am in this neighborhood, there's still a lot of old people, and it's very mixed, and there's still kind of that feeling of where, you know, people will go and check on the old lady next door, you know, we'll stop and chat and we'll help each other, but I can see even in myself that is dying in some areas, you know, where you know, you've got this, well, I'm just too busy, I can't deal with this, you know, there'll be somebody looking after that person, it's okay, you know, like where we've kind of, because we're all overwhelmed, we're abdicating responsibility for each other to others.
Yes.
You know, social work. I mean, that's, I always used to think of, because I used to work with older people who were alone, didn't have any friends, and we used to go and be their friends. So I think that's one thing, but I do think that that's going to change, and I can see, you know, as weather conditions get more unpredictable, as everything gets a little bit more wobbly and unstable, we're going to have to look after each other. And you could see that in Germany with the floods, you know, that people are going to help. And I do think that it's, you know, it's something that comes with having enough and being, you know, privileged and having being able to look at, we all, you know, we all strive to be able to be independent and to be able to look after ourselves. And it's something that's very much very important to people, but then the downside of that is that you know, you're so strong in your fortress that you don't need to let anybody in, because once you have friends like that, it's not, you know, you're not comfortable. I can see that in my daughter, who has those friends. They are all different, and they don't agree with each other all the time, and they don't always want to play the same things, and they need to get through that, you know. So I do think in terms of friendships, there is luck involved, especially if you want to have a number of people who all get on together. Having one is easier, or having, you know, some that mix occasionally, like this, having a few that always hang around together, that, you know, that is, I don't think that's very, very, very common. But I do think we have, you know, we have tribes, and we, you know, I know, I've lived in Cork for so long that I've seen that I pick somebody out in the street, and at this point I could say, we're probably going to be friends at some point, you know, and it so often happens, you know, you see somebody, you know, that they're on your wavelength, and then at some point they come into your path somehow, and then you become friends. So, you know, I do think they're all out there. The people are out there. You just have
we're
to
back
find
out.
them.
Be open. You have to leave your apartment often enough.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the conundrum, I think. Again, I think to me, you mix something in this conversation, you know, helping people or being there for each other and having quality time. Of course, I mean, I feel obliged to look after that neighbor she is older but strong, but I often enough reach out and say, are you okay? You know, if there's something, you know, you have my number, you can always come and ask and all these things. But that's one thing, that's one sense of support and seeing yourself in the community you're in. But the other thing that you then mentioned is that noticing that we are on a wavelength with somebody, because we need these kind of friendships, even if we might be coming across with different opinions, but the friendship is hopefully strong enough to bear that. So yeah, I see your peak individualism that you said, you know, where the peak individualism, it's like how kids these days and how I am picking what I want constantly, what I want, you know. Okay, I want to watch this movie. I mean, I have no television. Part of it was that I felt it was taking over too much of my day. But the other part was that if I wanted then something that would take part over of my day, you know, then I wanted to pick exactly what I wanted. And so, of course, the whole market is established itself by, you know, becoming stronger and stronger. And that's also what they are afraid of. Most security controlled devices, VPN channels, when you go, you know, that Google is trying to assimilate this individualism of that kind, you know, like you only get what you're asking for, you only constantly get what you're asking for. And even my daughter with her little pocket money, you know, she decided to eat what she wants. That's kind of like a deal in our household, you know, we cook, and if you don't eat it, you have to come out with it from your own pocket, you know. So I mean, we're talking about the whole thing, crisps, and, you know, like I just want to have pizza every day, I want to have noodles every day, I want to have pasta, you know. So that is interesting observation in how we at the same time then notice when we become so individualized that we're also losing the capability of, you know, going that extra mile to speak to somebody on the street, or allowing that friendship to be a tester for how we handle change and how we handle the outside world, because there are so many different variations of lifestyles and whatever. Yeah.
And I think what I'm getting from, you know, the idea of the Musketeers and this kind of idea of a friendship is like it's time, you know. It's like a friendship like that takes time, and it takes actually being in each other's company. And, you know, because so often, you know, the meeting on the street, or even the organized meeting, you know, it has a kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can put all your energy into it, and it can become, you know, or you have a dinner party, or you have a whatever, and, you know, but it's this being able to be with people and having the time to let down your guard and not always be organized, and, you know, and just to actually get to know people, which is what I was talking about, what I miss about living with Kerstin and the girls and her husband, you know, this kind of like just being time, not like, oh, we're meeting and we're having coffee and we're talking. It's just being together. And, you know, and that's a kind of a support, you know, that you can just like even not speak, not do, and be there for each other, you know. And I've only just, I mean, the pandemic, yeah, I think we're only going to see in the next years how that has affected. But there was one woman who I kind of like, we've kind of been thrown together in the last few years. Her husband, who was German, our kids were in the same play group. We knew each other before that, but and he passed away 3 years ago. And we've kind of, because our kids are the same age, and we've kind of started hanging out, and we bubbled during the last series of lockdowns here. You could kind of form little bubbles with people. I don't know if it was the same, you know, and we've just kind of like, it's the first time in a long time where I've gotten to a point with somebody where, you know, we kind of just she comes and she hangs out, and we just kind of, you know, there's still a lot we don't know about each other, but, you know, the kids are kind of noodling around, and it just feels like that kind of taking the time. And in some ways, the pandemic allowed that to happen, because she's a very sociable person, and she, you know, she has always loads of things going on. But because we weren't allowed to do that, we kind of, and we're in the same general proximity, you know, but I just really, I like that kind of, you know, you're living close by, you don't necessarily need anything from each other, like you're saying, the practical, you know, helping, or, but just that to have the other people there, that kind of, you know, we're all around. I think that's a very powerful support. You know.
And in Berlin, it's very much like that like on social media, everybody unloads their opinion and walks on. You know, it's almost like leaving a comment on Facebook or Instagram about like how rotten you look, you know, and how dare you. This kind of blip of comment that allows you to be in power and leaves the other person kind of digesting that. It's true, you know, the more random we scale our spare time, you know, like random as in like, I want to achieve this and that and that and that and that. And then you're running from A to B to Z, holding up all the balls in the air. You don't have space for that connection time, and that brings time brings. Yeah, the framing that time brings.
And I mean, in the past, people used to do their tasks together. They used to hang out and shell peas, or, you know, do whatever needed to be done, and then they would chat as they were doing that. Whereas we have it all segregated, you know, we need to have our houses clean so that we can invite people in, you know, and these are two separate things that take up separate amounts of time. Whereas before, you'd hang out and do stuff at the same time.
Yes.
You know, so I mean, the other extreme of that is village life, where you don't really have any control over who's there. You know, I think somewhere, as with many things, somewhere in between city life and village life.
Suburbia.
No.
I was thinking
that
communes.
was the idea.
I was thinking communes. Communes are getting more and more popular. I mean, they are out there. People who feel like you, Kerstin, almost like, you know, I need people around me. And if it's not, and I'm not talking about the ones that are only spiritually inclined, you know, like ashrams where there's a leader and you have to bow, but those permaculture communities that are showing up in pieces of the world that are more remote at this point, you know. So but I think
we talk about that. We talk, you know, we like this friend I was talking about, she really wanted to start a co-living situation. She's ready to go. She just can't find people who are also ready to go, you know, financially, practically. Where do you go, you know, city, country, you know, all those questions. There's quite a few people around us who are like, yeah, how can we do this? And even introverts going, how can we do a community for introverts, you know, where you have your own space, but then there's a communal space. And it's quite tricky to set that up.
It has to come from an effort that you made together. I just saw this this information slice of an old commune in Düsseldorf, a major city in Germany, and where there is one street where all the people back in the 70s, when the housing was rare, and like in England that happened too, you know, so they became inhabitants of free apartments and what you call them, squatters. Yeah, they became squatters, and through becoming squatters they formed a friendship, and that area, that particular street is still alive. And somebody was saying, who's been living there from day one, was saying, it just feels so different here. You know, I can be myself here, but it doesn't feel the same to go out in Düsseldorf. You know, you'll never find those kind of people. And that's what we're saying. You know, we want to feel that what we are thinking is somehow supported, because it's not alien to somebody else, and where we have to constant fight around our opinion, but where it's accepted of what we accept as our form of moving forward, communicating, you know, maybe living a lifestyle, a certain diet or whatever it is, you know, that kind of thrives.
So part of it is feeling like we're outsiders and wanting to feel like we belong somewhere.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that.
Where maybe like 85% of people are actually fine living where they are and in their suburbs and driving to see their friends, but
well, or maybe there aren't that many, you know, maybe like, I mean, looking around here where we've just moved to, I feel like everybody knows each other. I mean, Cove is a small town, you know, and all the kids went to the same preschool and now they're going, and all their siblings, you know, and I like when I see the mummies chatting and the grandparents collecting the kids, and, you know, it feels like there's, you know, the majority are, they're kind of, this is where they're from, this is where they live, this is where their friends are, you know. I mean, I think a lot of people do work in the city, but you know, I'm already beginning to find the people around the edges who moved here, you know, more recently, you know, and I'm being a complete nomad over, you know, in my adult life. You know, you've been in Cork for a long time, but you know, always starting again in where you're living does make you very aware of the people who, you know, who are living in their family homes, who have their, you know, go for walks with their babies, with their mummies and their, you know, and like, so I wonder, yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And a lot of that network is so invisible too, you know. You think there's these people who are, you know, kind of doing it all on their own, but actually they're not. You know, they have a network,
an invisible network,
often a family network, often as well. You know, the people who,
and that's the point. As we're becoming more and more travelers of the world, you know, at least like from where I'm standing and the people I get to know, we are losing the sense of belonging. You know, a lot of people undergo that as a cultural conflict, as in, you know, where do I belong to? I'm born, like Kerstin, you told us about, you have an Indian husband, you know, so your girls already have, you know, they have an Indian background and an Irish German background. So where do they belong to? That, you know, that makes the need for community even stronger, I think, just so the sense like I belong. And that's what my daughter is undergoing, I think, you know, coming from a different country, having lived in so many countries and moved around many, many times, and with being adopted, having also that sense of like, where do I belong? You know? Okay, I belong right here, whatever I define as I belong to, but at least I want to feel that my belonging is bigger than just one person, you know? So it kind of radiates.
And I mean, because our mother is German and we grew up in Ireland, so that kind of sense of, you know, feeling like you belong in different places. I mean, we've always kind of had that. You know, I never felt like, you know, suburban Dublin was, I mean, it feels more like home now that we don't live there in some ways. But, you know, there was always that sense of like not actually really being Irish, or feeling more German when we're in Ireland and more Irish when we're in Germany. you know, so I don't think I even know what it's like. So it probably is a sense of, you know, you want what you feel like you're missing.
Mm. Yeah.
Or, and I mean, I've been thinking
Maybe.
a lot about that home thing.
Well, and we were in the same house growing up. You can imagine how Shira moving around would feel.
Yes.
Be rootless, and
Mm.
not having built up those friends. You know, I mean, we have friends that we've had
Since
since
school.
since the beginning. You know,
Mm.
you know, so we have that kind of. We do have roots in that way. You can
Mm.
imagine how rootless you would feel
Mm.
if you had been moving around all the time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's what it is, right? Why do we want those musketeers? Because when we are uprooted for whatever reason, and I uprooted my life, and I don't really have old friends from my time in Germany any longer, besides my family, then we are trying to establish our belonging through outside factors like people and exchanges and things we like. And even though we can achieve the longing or belonging as an inner state, I think that's what the spiritual seekers, want to say. It's fine. You can also mute yourself there on the old camera. But yeah, belonging is not only something that we feel that we can have a place in this world, but that people see us in this world, and kind of recognize us and affirm our status of life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's when you start digging into it, isn't it? I mean, it's bringing you to the core, really.
Yeah.
You know, feeling.
Mm.
Yeah, feeling real.
Feeling real. Yes. Feeling like
yeah.
a being, even though we can feel ourselves, but we're living so strongly in our heads. That's what we kind of came from in this conversation, like how we individuated, as Kerstin said, and then we are moving forward in this bizarre kind of state of like, yeah, I do belong. And no.
And we're social creatures. I mean, we're like kind of programmed to live in groups in some ways,
That's how we evolved,
I would imagine.
Yeah. We're not coming from the Neanderthal who was trying to club his way through life by himself, or herself. But apparently we're coming from this other developed group that managed to hunt together and then share the chores. So of course that's very deeply ingrained in us. Yeah. And you gave me my answer there.
Cool.
Kerstin, one last thing from you maybe, and then I think we came really around in a well-rounded way. So far.
While you're thinking, Kerstin, can I just share my little metaphor that I've had, which has come from kind of moving kind of to the coast and spending a lot of time on beaches and things. And there's these the limpets, the little hat-like shells that you see stuck to rocks. And I found out that these limpets, they move very, very slowly to graze. They graze and they move along a particular track. I think they only go about a meter or half a meter from where they come from, but they have what's called a home scar. So they have a little circle where they come from. So they go off and they eat and they come back to the exact same little circle and they fit back into their home scar. So the little limpets, they're always in the same relationship to each other, and they go out and then they come back. And I love that kind of image of probably what I'm looking for. I want to be able to go out and then come back to my familiar arrangement and my home scar where I'm sucked on tightly and can't be moved by the waves and the tides. And
I love it.
metaphor.
Yes, coming home to what we
Coming home,
know
yeah.
best. Yeah.
Mhm.
Homecoming. Yeah.
Mhm.
Kerstin, have you come to?
I have two things. One thing about Neanderthals, which is not related but very interesting. Neanderthals couldn't remember their dreams, or probably didn't dream, and weren't able to represent, they weren't able to make representations of anything in their minds, which I think is very interesting.
Wow.
So they couldn't draw what they saw, or they couldn't make plans based on what they had learned. They couldn't project dreams and this kind of thing. So I found that very interesting. But then in terms of friendship, I suppose, what springs to my mind is, if we're looking for it, or if your daughter is looking for it, that I suppose time and space are key elements for creating friendships, and maybe also, coming away from this modern idea of having a list of what you think things should be, what you think your perfect partner should be, and then ticking off all those, like, having the intention of connecting with people and then seeing what comes and giving it time and space, because it's not always easy.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Yeah, coming off that list of, how do my friends should look like. I think we can have an aspiration of what will bring us together, as in like, they should have a common interest like music or whatever it is, because otherwise we don't click so fast. But yeah, right. Just be open for a connection. Just rather think of the connection you want from the inside instead of the perfect list and of what needs to be there.
How it needs to look.
Yeah, how it needs to look, exactly. Reminds me of when you do internet dating, and you see all the things of what the partner, he's ticking all the boxes, and meet the person alive and you're kind of not connecting. So many people have gone through that. Yeah. Thank you so much, dear Walshes.
We'll get a chance to hang out in the flesh
Mm-hmm.
one of these days.
One of these
Maybe a
days,
trip
exactly.
to Berlin. We have family in Berlin. We have an uncle in Berlin. There's no reason. Well, there is a reason not to go to Berlin. It's called a pandemic, but we'll deal with that.
Yes, we deal with that. I think traveling is not as hard as it's made out to be.
No.
But yes. Let's move.
Traveling with 5-year-olds is probably harder than.
You're almost there, Astrid.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Let me just say goodbye to the audience, and thanks again for listening. We don't construct these conversations in this podcast, so it might have taken us some time to come to the essence, but we're very grateful. I'm very grateful that you kept tying into this, and I'm grateful for Kerstin and Astrid to put some brain power behind my questions and experience and life perspective. Thank you to the two of you as well.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
See you.